From the very beginning of One Piece, Oda has created Blackbeard as the complete opposite of Luffy, a dark mirror reflecting the goofy Straw Hat Captain's ideals of freedom. As we are now approaching the series climax, all signs point towards this fateful clash between these two pirates that we have been waiting over 1,000 chapters for. More recently in the manga, Oda has been building up Imu, the shadowy ruler pulling the world government strings from the shadows. Someone like this is for sure going to be hyped up as a future opponent for Luffy, having them battle over the ideas of freedom versus control. With this, fans across different platforms have been left to speculate on who will be Luffy's final opponent. Will it be Blackbeard or will it be Imu? But what if I were to tell you that Blackbeard could be the one to take down Imu and not Luffy? This video is just going to be me exploring the possibility that Blackbeard may actually take down Imu in his position entirely, by defeating the supposed peak of authority in the One Piece world, as Blackbeard would not only elevate himself to the ultimate antagonist role, but this ideological clash with Luffy would become one over the fundamental nature of true freedom itself. And if you'd enjoy more One Piece content like this, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because YouTube tells me that 99% of you who watch my videos just aren't subscribed for some reason. So be sure to subscribe and comment on ideas of videos you'd like to see be done in the comment section below. While Luffy represents the freedom to follow one's dreams, Blackbeard aims for a more chaotic, anarchic vision of liberation, a world without the restraints of any governing system of authority like the world government. Blackbeard stealing the dark fruit and killing Thatch, one of his former crewmates, mirrors this selfish pursuit of power at any cost. Blackbeard's actions have shown he has no respect for institutions like the world government and navy. He infiltrated the prison of Impel Down simply to recruit powerful new crew members. At Marineford, he shamelessly capitalized on the chaos to expand his crew further and begin his era. This individuality that is taken to such an extreme level represents the opposite of Luffy's moral freedom, an unchained self-interest focused solely on personal gain. If Blackbeard were to defeat Imu, the mysterious ruler with so much still being unknown about him, it would allow Blackbeard to take down the world government entirely and reshape the world in his own individualistic image of freedom. Rather than the world being free to pursue respective dreams in peace, it would become a might makes right anarchy where the strongest rules through fear and no larger system exists. As we see as part of his plan, he wants to make his base of operations, Pirate Island, to be its own nation. This fundamental philosophical divide between Blackbeard and Luffy's ideals is what's at the heart of their opposition. Luffy wants a world of ethically pursued adventures, whereas Blackbeard wants a world where only he is free to indulge his every idea without restraint. And defeating Imu would just allow this terrifying vision to become reality, making Blackbeard not just Luffy's equal opposite, but the single greatest force of anarchic self-interest that Luffy must overcome for the sake of all that's good in the world. From their very first encounter at the beginning of the story in Mocktown across the western coast of Jaya, the narrative has carefully established Blackbeard as operating on a grander, more evil level than Luffy. He didn't just make an enemy of the Straw Hats, he betrayed and murdered a crewmate he had sailed with for decades under Whitebeard. This determination beyond the immoral level we've seen through the series to take power at all costs only escalated when Blackbeard intruded at the war at Marineford, capitalizing on the chaos by recruiting immensely powerful new crew members right under the world government's nose. While Luffy's appearance in the war was out of noble intentions to rescue Ace, Blackbeard's was to methodically expand his own strength. By the time the Straw Hats had regrouped after the time skip, Blackbeard had already solidified his status as one of the four emperors ruling over the new world. Once again, he gained an extraordinary new level of influence and authority before Luffy could reach those waters himself. If this pattern continues, Blackbeard taking down Imu, the mysterious singular ruler who controls the entire world government, would be the ultimate manifestation of him operating on a greater scale than Luffy. Blackbeard would no longer just be a highly powerful criminal pursuing his own aims. By taking down and overthrowing Imu, Blackbeard would become the one who took down the apparent pinnacle of authority governing the entire One Piece world. This huge act would elevate the Luffy vs Blackbeard pirate rivalry to its most dramatic philosophical heights we've seen. Blackbeard wouldn't simply be Luffy's anti-hero. He'd be the opponent who tore down the overarching system and power structure that the Straw Hats have been going against this whole time. Their clash would go beyond territorial struggle and become an ideological war for the future of how the world itself is governed. Does freedom belong to all, or just self-interested individual? The narrative has been laying the groundwork for such an explosive climax all along. If Blackbeard were to actually defeat Emu and even take over his position atop the world government, it would elevate his ambitions far beyond simply becoming the freest man on the seas as the Pirate King. By overthrowing the apparent supreme authority of the world itself, Blackbeard's chaotic individualistic vision of freedom would become the new reigning philosophy governing over everything. Blackbeard would no longer just hold the title of the Pirate King that Luffy and so many before him have pursued. Blackbeard would become the literal king of the world, the ruler that Akainu and the Marines and even the Celestial Dragons must answer to. An anarchic pirate forging his own independent path would perversely become the new face of true authority and order for all. This unparalleled dominance over land and sea alike would make Blackbeard more than just Luffy's philosophical opposite. He would be his absolute inverse manifestation. While Luffy wishes to remain free to experience the world's wonders, Blackbeard would rule over that very same world with an iron fist, extinguishing the dreams of all who oppose his self-interests. Luffy has always tried to live life adventurously yet morally, never overstepping his bounds or imposing his freedom on others. In defeating Emu, Blackbeard would represent the most narcissistic and demeaning subjugation of the entire world to a singular idea. He'd go from the so-called freest man alive, roaming the seas, to the most extremely authority-abusing tyrant immorally dominating every living soul. Their very different ideals and ambitions would be pushed to the absolute highest point of their polarizing course. The final war would pit the righteous battle for ethical dream-chasing freedom against the most selfish dictatorial compliance to one man's corrupt rule. It would be the ultimate thematic climax Oda could make between his story's twin ideological icons. With Emu out of the picture due to Blackbeard, this conflict would clearly turn into the foundation of an ideological war over the very meaning of freedom and justice itself. This would no longer be just a territorial struggle over ruling the seas or protecting the power structure of the current status quo. The fate of what fundamental philosophy that will shape and define the ethics of the entire world that is currently unbalanced is at hands. On one side would stand Luffy, the moral ideal, who has always fought for the freedom to pursue one's dreams righteously and experience life's adventures to the fullest. His victories are achieved through determination, self-betterment, and protecting the hopes of those around him. Luffy represents an ethical conception of freedom, one founded on goodness and respect for others' liberties. Directly opposing this would be Blackbeard's vision of freedom, distorted into anarchic self-indulgence without limits or moral restrictions. By defeating Emu, the former ruler's control over the world would be replaced by Blackbeard's individualistic domination. Rather than collective freedom, only his singular ideas and hunger for power would go unprevented or unchallenged, under threat of brutal force. Luffy and Blackbeard's clash would be the ultimate ideological battle, the very critical ideas of the entire One Piece world's understanding of what justice and autonomy truly mean. The decades of parallels and purposeful mirroring Oda has written between Luffy and Blackbeard's personas would arrive at their philosophical peak. Completely opposing value systems would finally collide in an all-out war to determine if the world will be shaped by ethical individual freedom or narcissistic domination. This would no longer be about one man's narrow-minded ambitions versus another's. The echoed ideological shockwaves of their colossal struggle would set the very foundations for how human liberty and dignity will be defined for generations to come. It would be the war to permanently answer One Piece's central ethos, being what does it mean to truly be free. The highest possible narrative stakes would underscore Luffy and Blackbeard's spirit versus spirit, dream versus dream clash of ideals. With Imu's downfall at Blackbeard's hand, the Navy's Admiral Akainu would also be freed from his previously serious role as an unwavering attack dog for the Elders that we see with people like Kizaru, who is currently stuck in that position. No longer would Akainu simply be carrying out Imu's ruthless vision of absolute justice by following orders from on high. Akainu would now have to tackle the weight of Blackbeard's anarchic evil that is threatening to replace Imu's institutional authority. This could present a fascinating moral gray zone for Akainu's character to operate within. While his ideology of justice has always been portrayed as inflexible, extremist belief, having to actually confront the chaos of Blackbeard's individualistic worldview could actually add some much needed nuance. Akainu has defined himself by a loyal dedication to the world government's rules and hierarchy, but what happens when that system no longer exists? In this storyline, Akainu may ultimately find himself fighting not just to uphold empty official policy, but to legitimately save the world itself from being consumed by Blackbeard's selfish but corrupt anarchy. He could be positioned as an unconventional heroic force, still clinging to his uncompromising ethical certainty, yet struggling to determine what absolute justice truly means without an institutional framework defining it for him. This would give the often one-note Akainu far more qualities and introspective internal conflict. Does he ultimately fight to uphold the world government's old ideals at all costs? Or does he have an ethical awakening and realize a new, more tempered form of justice is needed to end Blackbeard's rise as the ultimate evil? Perhaps he could even be forced into rare philosophical allegiances with the likes of Luffy's crew. Rather than being a flat authoritarian villain swinging his magma fists at the protagonists, Akainu would become a living embodiment of complex, moral gray disruption in the face of Blackbeard's completely opposing worldview. Akainu's struggle to redefine his values and sense of righteous direction could provide some of the narrative's most compelling yet. It would turn a formerly conflict of good versus bad into a richer tapestry of clashing philosophical ideals, all that are sparked by the circumstances of Imu's reign ending in Blackbeard's ultimate conquest. By overthrowing Imu, Blackbeard would evolve from Luffy's parallel to his complete opposite, unmaking the very world Luffy wishes to see. Their already hugely contrasted personalities and ambitions would become a true philosophical divide, representing the struggle between individual freedom and moral justice. Oda has been building towards this explosive confrontation since the very beginning. If executed properly, Blackbeard taking down Imu could provide a natural yet shocking climax to One Piece's decade-long narrative of ideological warfare.